Hi everyone, my name is Tyler and I'm here to help you get into your new 40k army. 40k as a hobby can be very expensive to get into, but my goal with this series is to help you get a full army going without having to break the bank. Before we dive into the list, let's talk about some basic rules that we're going to be using for the list building process here. Our first goal is going to be to keep it affordable and utilize box deals. For everything that we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be looking at it from an MSRP value from Games Workshop themselves. Now, I don't recommend buying everything MSRP from Games Workshop. Often, local hobby stores, eBay, Amazon, things of that nature will have much better deals for the kits that I'm about to show you. Our second goal is that we're going to be making the list in steps, starting at 500 points and working our way up to 1,000 points, 1,500 points, and 2,000 points. Our third rule is we're going to be avoiding Forge World and Finecast. Many Forge World models are often very pricey for the points that they provide you on the table, and the resin used can be hard to work with, especially for beginners. As far as Finecast goes, I just don't think that they're quite as high quality as the plastic models that you can get otherwise. Our fourth goal is to aim to make lists with decent competitive viability. We're going to be trying to make lists that can do well at casual tournaments, in your games with friends, or maybe even get you some wins at major tournaments. Our fifth and final rule is the most important one. Just because I don't mention a model in my list, it doesn't mean that it isn't good. The most important thing that you can do is collect models that you think are cool. There's an entire side of the hobby that has nothing to do with playing, and if you don't like the models you're painting and building, you're not going to get the most out of this hobby. Today we're going to be talking about the Black Templars. The Black Templars are sort of a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists. They've been on a 10 millennium long crusade so that they can kind of try to get around certain rules in the Codex Astartes that would otherwise limit how many Marines can be in their one chapter. During this crusade, they've spent a lot of time warring against various Chaos factions, but also a lot of different Xenos factions. Additionally, they have a very large hatred for mutants of any kind, meaning that they do not allow Psykers in their forces at all. They have no librarians anywhere in their army. If you thought the regular Space Marine and regular Imperium member really hated Xenos and really hated heretics, you have seen nothing yet. The Black Templars heard the term casual racism and decided that was not good enough, and they needed to invent competitive racism. So why should you join the Black Templars on their galaxy-spanning crusade? To start off, they are a Divergent Space Marine chapter. That means that they get access to not only their own rules, but they also get access to all of the rules within the Codex Space Marines. They also get their own unique units that they can use on top of the regular Space Marines. You can kind of think of a Divergent chapter as Space Marines Plus. They're also one of the only Space Marine factions that actually has a pretty decent combat patrol. And it's not just a decent combat patrol for themselves, it's a decent combat patrol in general. There's a lot of problems with other Space Marine combat patrols, but Black Templars are actually in a pretty good place with theirs. Their unique vehicles are straight upgrades to the standard variants that you might otherwise see. A Black Templar Impulsor is just better than a regular Impulsor because it's 5 extra points and you get multi-meltas. This is a big part of why Black Templars in vehicle spamming lists tend to be the popular way to see those vehicle spamming lists being run. As of recording, Black Templars also have the most viable builds of any Space Marine faction. They have winning lists within their own detachment, within the Gladius detachment, within the Firestorm detachment, within the Ironstorm detachment. You can really put Black Templars in anything and have success with them. They have great melee threats with their units that actually have some pretty solid durability and will hit like an absolute truck. The amount of damage that your sword brethren are going to be able to put out is quite frankly not okay. They also have a very flexible detachment rule. You're usually going to take the feel no pain option, but there are situations where you might decide that you want to take some of the other ones. So it sounds like there's no real cons to Black Templars, but you would definitely be wrong on that. For starters, on the hobby side, painting white over black can be extremely annoying. You are going to often have to do it in steps by starting at a black, then going to a gray, then a light gray, then a lighter gray, then going to white. Or you're going to have to take all of the parts that you want to have be white, put them off to the side, prime them in white, and then bring them back over later to the parts that you've primed in black, and it can just all be very taxing and annoying. Highlighting black armor and making it look good can also be pretty difficult. It's not too hard to get a basic looking paint job down for Black Templars because you can just hit them with black primer. But if you want it to look really good, you're going to have to put in a lot of extra work. They're also a melee army that isn't very fast and doesn't have a lot of things that help it get into melee particularly well. This means that they have a very large reliance on transports, which are often very expensive to collect. Rhinos and impulsors are less than 1 point per dollar a lot of the time, and it just makes it a little bit more expensive than you might like. They also don't have any good ways to either generate command points or cheat command points by having something like a 0 CP battle tactic. And finally, you just can't run any Psyker units. That means that all of those nice invulns and other effects that you might be able to get from librarians, sorry, you're out of luck. If you've seen my Space Marines video, you're familiar with the army rule. It's Oath of Moment. You're going to reroll hits on a target that you choose, which is a very nice overall damage boost to the army, regardless of what you're trying to do with it. It's weaker against MSU armies, which are just going to spam out as many cheap units as they can, but if you're up against a lot of vehicles, or if you're up against an army that is going to run one really heavily supported unit, this is a great way of threatening that target. The first detachment that I'm going to be showing you today is the Righteous Crusaders. Their army rule is going to let you pick one of 4 major effects. You can either have lethal hits for your melee units, a feel no pain and improved leadership, you can have an invulnerability against psychic attacks, or you can have sustained hits. This is a very flexible army rule. It's going to let you do a lot of different things against different opponents. Maybe you're playing hordes and you decide, you know what, I really do want to have sustained hits. Maybe you're fighting a bunch of vehicles and you decide you want lethal hits. Maybe you just want to shove your stuff into the middle of the board, not have to worry about it and take the feel no pain. Or maybe you're playing Grey Knights or Thousand Suns and you just decide, you know what, I just want an army-wide 4-up invuln. You get to pick it at the start of the game, so it's the best kind of flexible detachment rule that you can really find. For the first 500 point list, if you heard me talking about the Combat Patrol being actually pretty good, this isn't going to be surprising to you. We're going to be picking up the Combat Patrol, and then we're also going to be picking up a Primaris Lieutenant to go with it. The Lieutenant is going to be equipped with the Neo-Volkite pistol, power sword, and shield, and then he's also going to have Tannhauser's bones so that he can give the Primaris Crusaders a better feel no pain. The Marshal is going to have a plasma pistol and Perdition's Edge, just in case you maybe wanted to also be able to go into that more offensive style. But the Marshal also has a better offensive profile with his melee weapons, so he makes better use of Perdition's Edge than the Lieutenant might have. As far as the intercessors go, they're just going to be plain old boring intercessors. You're going to have a grenade launcher, a power fist, a plasma pistol. As much as you aren't thrilled to have these in your list, they're also not terrible. You're just probably going to replace them once you've got about 2,200 points of Space Marines, but for your first startup of the collection, they're fine. Now the big thing here is going to be the Primaris Crusaders, who are going to be equipped with chainswords, power fist, power weapon, heavy bolt pistol, and a regular bolt pistol. They're going to be able to put out a pretty solid chunk of damage, and especially with the Marshal and the Lieutenant leading them, they're going to be not too bad. The Lieutenant being able to give them fallback and shoot or fallback and charge is great, and then also just having lethal hits even without needing to necessarily take that army rule, means that you're going to be doing a lot of damage, including to things like vehicles in case you find some kind of skew list at 500 points. One thing I'll say about this list is that the Impulsor is a little bit awkward. What it wants to do is start with the Primaris Crusaders inside of it, but it doesn't have the capacity to hold that many models. So it has to start with the Intercessors. But the Intercessors don't want to be in it. They want to just be able to sit on the point, give it its sticky, and then join the fight. What this means is that your Impulsor is going to be starting the battle with the Intercessors inside. The Intercessors are immediately going to get out. They're going to sticky the objective. Then if the car is still close enough by and hasn't moved too far up the board, they're going to try to get back into it. And then, worst comes to worst, it's kind of a cheap tank that's just got some pretty okay firing power. At 1,000 points, we're going to be picking up a lot more of the iconic Black Templar units. We're going to be picking up an Emperor's Champion. We're going to be picking up High Marshal Helbrecht. We're going to be picking up 1 box of Sword Brethren. And then we're going to be picking up 1 box of Scout Squads. You've seen the Scout Squads before in my other lists. You're going to keep seeing them in future Space Marine lists. They're kind of an amazing unit. They're all going to be running around with the Astartes shotgun so they can potentially advance and still do actions on turn 1 so they can be the most flexible and valuable tool for that very early game plan that you might need to have for different matchups. Now, High Marshal Helbrecht is going to be leading your Sword Brethren at this point, but the thing is he's not going to be going with the Lieutenant just yet. If we give Helbrecht and the Sword Brethren the Lieutenant, and then we try to put them in the Impulsor, there's going to be too many models. So unfortunately, at this point in time, Helbrecht is going to be the only one leading them. However, he is going to be able to make them hit very, very hard. The Emperor's Champion can either go with the Intercessor Squad, you could put him with the Crusaders, or maybe even just have him run around on his own and be a nice little kind of solo damaging unit. Wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but it's an option. At 1,500 points, we're going to be having the probably hardest pickup to find in a Land Raider Crusader. And then we're also going to be picking up 2 more boxes of Black Templar Sword Brethren to go alongside it. The Land Raider is going to be built as a Redeemer with Stormbolter, Multi-Melta, and Hunter Killer Missile. The Primary Sword Brethren are going to have the max amount of all of their special weapons that you can possibly give them, and they are going to be going into the Land Raider with Helbrecht and with the Lieutenant for the very nasty combination of +1 strength, lethal hits on 5s, and being able to fall back, being able to be super durable thanks to Tannhauser's Bones. This is the kind of crux linchpin of your army. And being able to dart it up the board in a Land Raider is all the better. For 2,000 points, if you can, you're going to try to get your hands on another Land Raider. You're going to get your hands on a box of Primaris Infiltrators. And if you cannot find a Lieutenant with Combi Weapon, you're going to go and pick up a Primaris Lieutenant in Phobos Armor. The Primaris Lieutenant in Phobos Armor is close enough to looking like the same model, but you will need to potentially have a Combi Weapon left over from somewhere else, or you'll just have to tell people, hey, this is the guy with a Combi Weapon. He's a Lone Op Lieutenant. At this point, the Intercessors are just going to sticky the objective for the first turn, and then they're going to move off. The Infiltrators can potentially spread out around the point and make sure that you can't deep strike within 12 inches of it so that your home objective is safe, while the other Infiltrators are in the midboard to make sure that your other good stuff is safe. Intercessors can run around to the next objective and try to sticky that one as well. Why not? Other than that, your Sword Brethren are still going into the middle of the board. Your other 5-man of Sword Brethren are potentially going in the Impulsor. Meanwhile, all those Crusaders that you've been working with since the beginning are going to be able to go into the second Land Raider, and you're going to just be able to shove into the middle of the board with heavy armor, with Multi-Meltas, and tons of Space Marines just piling out and sitting on that midfield. But on the other hand, maybe you don't care as much about being so far deep into the infantry style, and you really want to make the most out of those very special and unique vehicles and go into the Ironstorm detachment. The detachment rule, very simple. Every single activation, your units get to reroll 1 hit roll, 1 wound roll, or 1 damage roll. Makes it very nice for Meltas especially, because if you hit and then you wound, then you roll a 2 on the damage, just re-roll it. Fish for something higher than a 3 or a 4. If you are chasing this style, then what we're going to do at 500 points is going to look very, very silly and very weird, but it's 500 points. Who really cares? We're going to pick up 2 Gladiators, and we're going to be picking up 2 Primaris Tech Marines. You can either have the Tech Marines split up and each of them follow their own Gladiator, or you could have them move together as a castle. It doesn't really matter at 500 points. It's basically just kill your opponent anyways. But we're going to be making sure that the two gladiators are built separate ways. The first one's going to be built as a Lancer, and the second is going to be built as a Reaper. The Reaper is nice because you're going to be able to you run it into those infantry that you're going to be seeing at 500 points, because almost every combat patrol has infantry that's going to be the kind of focal point of the list. And the Lancer is super nice because you are allowed to reroll a hit roll, a wound roll, and a damage roll when resolving attacks. This compounds with the rerolls that you have from the Ironstorm rule. So if you're firing off the multi-meltas and only one of them hits, hey, use your free reroll from the Lancer. Then you roll both the wounds. Both of the wounds miss? Cool. You use one of the wound rerolls from your Ironstorm and one of the wound rerolls from your Lancer, and you get to reroll both of those wounds. You get all the wounds in? Cool. You could potentially wind up rerolling both of the damages. It's very, very flexible and gives you tons of opportunity for consistency. At 1,000 points, we're going to be having a pretty steep jump in terms of price. We're going to be picking up a Land Raider, we're going to be picking up a Redemptor Dreadnought, and we're going to be picking up a Scout Squad. One of the Tech Marines is going to have to drop its enhancement for now, but we're still going to have Adept of the Omnissiah because it's cheap enough. But this is going to let us fit in one Scout Squad. We want to make sure that we have this one Scout Squad because we need something to kind of stall a little bit for our vehicles, and something that can kind of potentially just be that idiot that's going to sit on the back objective for a 1,000 point game if we really need it to, or potentially hold a midfield objective. The Lancer and the Reaper are still going to be here. The Redeemer is going to be a Redeemer, and it's going to have a Hunter-Killer Missile, Multi-Melta, and a Stormbolter. And then the Redemptor Dreadnought's going to have a Macro Plasma Incinerator, Onslaught Gatling Cannon, and Stormbolter, because it's a good, well-round package, and this is probably what you're going to run on almost every Redemptor Dreadnought anyways. Even though we are technically in the Ironstorm detachment, we still want to make sure that we have some good melee threat and something that can be in the middle of the board for our vehicles. So we're going to be dipping into the Black Templar specific units. We're going to be picking up 2 boxes of Sword Brethren, we're going to be picking up High Marshal Helbrecht, and we're going to be picking up a Lieutenant. We talked about the Lieutenant Helbrecht Sword Brethren in a Redeemer combo earlier. It's still going to be great. Your Redeemer is going to want to get up into the middle of the board anyways. Might as well drop off a nasty payload for most people to deal with. And then let the Sword Brethren do the heavy lifting of sitting on that midfield objective and pulling other threats into the line of fire for your vehicles. Sword Brethren are durable. They're not that easy to get rid of. And so, by having them sit out in the objective, your opponent's going to have to commit quite a bit, which you are then going to return fire onto. You could also potentially play it where you've got the Redemptor Dreadnought sitting out in the middle, and then the Land Raider comes in, unloads the Sword Brethren, and the Sword Brethren counterpunch to avenge the Dreadnought. It's very flexible in how you want to handle that, depending on what kind of opponent you're facing. Finishing up at 2,000 points, we're going to be picking up another Primaris Lieutenant in Phobos armor. Like I said earlier, if you can, get a Primaris Lieutenant with combi weapon. If you can't, just give this guy a combi weapon from some kind of Kipash that you do down the line. Maybe you have some extra Marines that have a combi bolter left over. Or maybe you just tell your opponent, hey, this is this model. Most people aren't going to be able to really tell the difference. You're also going to be picking up some Primaris Infiltrators because they are just very well priced for what you were getting. And we're also going to be picking up one more Gladiator so that we can have a little bit more of those Black Templar specific vehicles in the list. If you heard what I had to say in part 1, this is going to seem pretty straightforward. Scout squads are going to be up in the middle of the board. Infiltrators can potentially hold your backfield. The vehicles are going to be able to come around from the corners, while the Land Raider Redeemer just drives your Sword Brethren into the middle of the battlefield, and you let them go to town on whatever is there. It's not too complex of a strategy change compared to what we were dealing with earlier. The hardest part is going to be making sure that you don't trap your own vehicles in your deployment zone, because your vehicles can't go through each other. That's going to round out everything that I've got for you today for Black Templars. Overall, very thematic army, very cool army. but they are one of the more expensive Space Marine factions to collect just because they've got so many different parts that they will kind of want to have access to, especially with transports. Because of this, they are going to still wind up at the bottom of the $750 to $900 tier. And that is everything I have for you today. If you enjoyed the video, please consider doing all the YouTube pleasantries. If you want to help support the content so that I can continue to put out videos, consider becoming a member on YouTube or supporting me over on Ko-fi. Supporters receive things like early videos, shoutouts, heavier weight on their votes for community polls for what content I do next, as well as one-on-one help with building up their lists. Thank you all, and I will see you in the next video.